The United States and its assemblies founded upon raciality, genocide, enslavement, the sensitization of mass genocide of indigenous nations, stealing of black bodies, ecological devastation, anti-American violence is operationalized to black and native death through gratuitous ecological violence. Liberal reforms are driving the planet towards the end. Only decolonial abolitionist environmental struggle can solve. Horsemen on the name of black and native people, ecological devastation of black and native people populations have become close on the black states and indigenous savages of the plantation and colonies, service, temporal, civil, and common exchange, and graceful acceleration, non-humanity, and sustains the necessity of violence as against environmental struggle, and ground cells, abolition, decolonization, giving gratuitous ecological violence, capitalism not possible without slavery, native genocide, the world's deepest pleasure, come from the killing of black and native people, the liberal process to make us comfortable and prepare for our graves. Externally, Western thought denies relationality of the outside world, which situates the native at a site of objectification and dead to colonialism. This produces otherization in order to make Western thought coherent. Requires 18. And denying rationality become alienated from the world around us. Europe's philosophy theorizing humanity and non-relation to the world and medical desire to divide subject knowledge and objectification succeeds in itself against as a thing within Western thought objective. As epistemic necessity metaphysics become indebted to colonialism to make itself coherent. And the project of rewilding requires appropriation of indigenous ecological knowledge, anything other than confrontation with this right to reproduces violence against indigenous peoples. The impact as essential as primitivism is certain. 16 U.S. rewilding appropriation of indigenous people's ecological knowledge and reality turned out to be more complex than the romantic picture imagined embodiment of settler colonialism with environmentalist struggle while centers constantly ambushing our efforts to grapple with their status as non-native settlers. They come to terms with their role in ongoing colonialism, rewilding practice until cultural appropriation seen by native peoples as deeply disrespectful, radical movements rich, essential primitivism and historical colonial products and provide architecture violence against native communities into any environmental movement will be set a colonial not intended and use efforts toward decolonization. In normative debates surrounding state-led rewilding, reinscribed capitalist accumulation that justifies anti-black and colonial modes of environmental justice that produces apolitical activism that turns the topic into dramatic spectacle, creating unethical relationships to the earth. Only the one who sees dive into new modes of rewilding solves rapidly collapsing ecological functionality across earthly environments of rewilding, which scrub removal, reintroduction of predators, and keeps in reverse rewilding based on apolitical ideas, making no contribution towards resistance against land-led links of neoliberal biodiversity, the carbon offsetting, human rights abuse in the Congo, wealthy interest at the forefront, fetishization, top garden, and tree planting, reflects bourgeoisie, aesthetic, dramatic spectacle of human relationship, social ecology, laws are species to maintain itself, use that relationship is driving metabolic radical human nature, proof impossible biodiversity, meta struggle, and unity, solidarity, essentially against erosion and fracking and pollution of rewilding through social ecology, levels, maintain social reproduction rather than some fantasy of natural imbalance. In framings of extinction through rewilding, environment, action, reaction, reproduce narratives of settler apocalypse, actively re-entrenching and weaponizing white settler imaginaries against marginalized people that produces a rate which ways and turns every back. Society collapse started taking place, economic and ecological collapse, unfolding the sense of the apocalypse happening out, we are in denial, non-colonized communities, non-colonized are already living post-apocalyptic conditions, apocalypse is the only experience of apocalypse of the privileged class of their mass destruction event everywhere in the United States. People become refugees in martial law, declared a hurricane, treated Detroit started post-collapsing government, let them die. They shot people to keep them from getting food and supplies they need. They bring wealth over a bunch of poor people. Right, that'll happen every year. Apocalypse structure. Ultimately, caps accumulation, inequality, state power, and racism, and civilization. The apocalypse indigenous people face the end of world colonial ideology and action. Some indigenous people inhabiting a sense of character, utopian future. The future is all utopia they ever seen. Universalizing society for a particular white settler society. When academics or eco-apocalypse on the class, we raise the ways that indigenous peoples that survive and risk collapse that they're currently fighting. If the apocalypse already happened, then we must engage in the knowledge and experience of marginalized people, also preventing accumulation and appropriation of black, brown, indigenous people, while acknowledging the extinction time unique for those whose worlds already ended. How are those lives being lived now, and how can we learn from those beings to inform on our future without being parasitic on their suffering? Everywhere, land resistance refuses whales to resist, bees that refuse to work, bomb islands that reconstitute themselves, the land resistant forms of people, indigenous peoples, resistant lands, resistant indigenous people coming to continue to suffer illegal capitalist technology is part of that resistance, and technological beings resist too. I from the rewildings in Turtle Island, the one he sees historical count, a black indigenous resistant to intimacy, build studies and ethical care that creates new worlds beyond anti-black and colonial violence toward the decolonial practice. Well, so through what care we do the inquiry regarded by the black ethic of imitation care for blacks, acknowledging obstacles being self-neglected care of the journeys of rewilding, you are encouraged to investigate desire and reducing colonialism and trying to say the blacks and capitalists decolonization as a form of invitation to slow down, mediating care and bear with your own personal disorientation, world building, freedom practice, order, understanding communities and worlds. I believe are to be African language and knowledge education, got research from genocide and present language and technology, but the practice of decolonization and neutralizing indigenous, remembering there's no way about to do 7,000 angels shows all over Turtle Island, remembering violence and justice led by government sources, Turtle Island, remember the shared grievances, African with indigenous people, Turtle Island, remember just like roles that confused to be captured by the peoples who set out to destroy us, a collective part of we, and centering demands for abolition and land back through black and indigenous entanglements shifts our relationship towards nature and refuses European landscapes that overturn the ancient scenes to use physical justification for colonial environmentalism. The role of the ballot is appropriate for the strategies the best versus colonialism with debate. Curly Swiss 23. The solution of environmental change to become apolitical and overriding abolition land back refusal of European landscapes to reject proposals that rely on civilization development. The ever seen risk becoming justification for colonial environmentalism understandings surrounded and black utilizations set the terms differently, questioning the human nature divides centers a place between relations and indirect colonial product rather than technical solution frameworks may begin with ingenuity and analysis of Western thinking east the largest time. It's never makes it really different to the possible opposite of the possible goals. We consider the potential temporality of the rise in African scholarship provided from constitution to the body relational world building, which is not far from care and distributing into mapping centers, not on the settler state's recognition, but on whether the earth will recognize us, cruel nostalgia colonialism, converts flesh and automation, free will murder and reproducing and turn a person to murder in seconds, representing or attachment to one life to each other and ourselves against returning to Utopia, welfare force, rejecting parties and assault to abolition, decolonization, pride, and relations to the earth, and debate itself as the site of black fungibility, native genocide, and responsibility model debate, the platforms, anti-black and colonial modes of statistic argumentation, can harness the greatest power of all, that produces the best class, who is theorizing from and through genocide as the opportunity for refusal of the rules and procedures of the settler master form. Number 23. Former emergence of the informal activities and informal invitation, theorizing decisions and raciality rather than presume performative distance to go from genocide debaters must consider theorizing debate, selfless genocide, on debate, receive civility, distance, and presumption, neutrality, native debate, resume setting components of already known and their role in nature studies to announce intervention in context sections to situation of black studies into dwelling with an uninheritable, unescapable history, native debate with a free list of not reckoned with the intent to activate the work of black people made native debate possible, theorizing genocide, not render native speakers not into black, theorizing through genocide as a form of refusal to the settler master form, power to pose a question, takes over native black continuance, moves to the margins, studying in the morning, is already happening, needs a refinement to pose the question, is at the end of the world we live made for close banging the committed to uncivilized.
Yeah. Nothing skipped.
No.
Okay.
Sorry. Pages.
Oh, sure.
There, that's here too. Yeah, don't be
Yeah,
scared.
I was gonna say, y'all, there's like chairs. Y'all don't have to sit on the floor.
The memorial text sound for.
Thank you. Okay, cool.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Repel describes a mode of rewilding that is socio and ecological. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, there's a few different things. The repel and all the evidence describes the AF's rewilding between two different things. First, it talks about questioning the division between human and nature. It says that the AF would allow for us to re-understand our relationship to nature, not in a dominant position, but rather allow us to create a new understanding of nature.
Okay. It continues to then say that rewilding through socialist ecology will help us maintain social reproduction. How?
Yeah, well, that simply is talking about how the affirmative advocates for a sort of socialist rewilding, which allows for us to create things like communitarian organizing, mutual aid, which allow for black and native life to create survival strategies outside the state.
Okay. As a result of that, Williams describes how that would build an ethics of care. Can you explain what that looks like?
Yeah, that's extremely similar. It allows for things like communitarian organizing, where we're able to mutually care for one another, not only each other, but also the environment, which is exactly what I was talking about earlier with the human-nature divide and our relationship to the environment.
It says that to care requires acknowledging the obstacles between the self and collective care. What are those obstacles?
Yeah, wait, you're talking about the Williams evidence?
Yeah.
Sorry, repeat the question?
It says that there are obstacles between self and collective care. What are those obstacles?
Yeah, it specifically talks about how, specifically, like, that collective care is not something that's possible through things like the state, and which is why survival strategies that are to be created outside the state are necessary.
It says the problem with care work is that the needs of blackness and black people still tend to be deprioritized. Can you explain what the affirmative does to resolve that?
Yeah, the AF is, which the Williams and the Curly-Smith evidence very clearly talk about, it advances a form of decolonization and land back, but also an abolition of the U.S. federal government, which allow for all those things, and then to create survival strategies.
Sure. The second piece of Juarez evidence, it does an analysis in which it creates a distinction between psychoanalytical approaches and critical race approaches. One line from this card is, critical race theory is distinct because critical race theory's cure is its analysis of the social and political. Does the affirmative identify with this analysis of the social and political, or more of a psychoanalytical approach?
Well, both the Juarez piece of evidence make psychoanalytical claims and ontological claims about native life. The first Juarez evidence talks about gratuitous violence, about how the native body faces ecological gratuitous violence. I can explain what that looks like. But the second piece of evidence the Juarez evidence talks about how settler society and settlers themselves have libidinal drives to exterminate like the native life.
Okay, why is that analysis important to affirmative solvency?
Well, we have made specific reasons why, state-centric rewilding and all these survival strategies that the 1AC talks about are not possible in current settler society in USFG, which is why things like decolonization is backwards.
And what is the role for the negative under your interpretation of debate?
To negate the affirmative.
Okay, how?
You can say that our method of things like decolonization or abolition are bad.
Okay, so test the method.
You can test the method. You can read philosophical arguments, case turns, counter methods.
I'll send it around.
What's the order?
Give me a second.
Yeah.
Wait, you said you sent the chain to which email? Actually, I'm not
It was like the Sid debate one.
Okay, it's doc is called 1AC, but the 1AC is
What's the order?
oh, sorry.
Oh, you're
1, 2,
good.
3, 4, 5 in the case.
Any particular order on case or just top down?
Top down. Cool.
I'm good.
Big one, so I just got the same dollar.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
We endorse the 1EC absent their affirmation of psychoanalysis, brush 17 psychoanalysis underpinned by the assumptions that unconsciously reproduce the colonial imagination which the civilized world of traces of this arbitrary pronounced issue. Here's the way the imagery of slavery is reproduced in accounts of violence with the effects of running together colonialism and violence. There are many ways to defend psychoanalysis, something disturbing recursion sustains primitivity that carries forward race to counter the colonized psychoanalysis carries over this binaries disorder in the post-colonial era unconsciously reproduces them even when used in the decolonized movement. Psychoanalysis beyond its Hartman's colonialism can be found in Brazil, and psychoanalysis reinforces colonialism, a vision of nation building that post-colonialism reshaped and encounters the social control tensions occurring in Argentina and relies upon racist tropes that script black and indigenous people as barbarian and savage trash. 13. Psychoanalysis frequently aligns itself with racist tropes. This is despite a contrary urge to psychoanalysis that reforms racist colonialism deeply emblematic for psychoanalysis is ingrained in psychoanalytical thinking. Terminology has effects on contemporary thinking and practice ways that have not recognized history of the structure at the beginning. Psychoanalysis, even though these sporting assumptions are mainly unstable, the terminology and conceptual baggage of the savage and the barbarian remained with psychoanalysis for some time, still align only just or type of references to primitive feelings that ode of rationality is given priority here, which is the masculine roots in the unreason of attribute to women, children, and primitive cultures. It competes for us. 18. How to inserted in blue. Now, our interpretation is that the negative burden is to negate the abstract, only being satisfies narrow testing of their specific claims, which they said is important to the negative's role in debate. Anything else cause extreme impact turns, which are violent, lack nuance. Impelling forcing negation makes it defend racism good, which is violent. Next up. The physical containment, torture of enslaved Africans is instrumental in the production of black people as outside of civil society, of civil subjectivity, linguistic coherence, and personal sovereignty. Mental. 16. If winter gets are long-term modes of cognition, slow formulation of the flesh, linguistic regimes, to ways, the core concern of corporeal life, likewise the body inhabits dominant social symbolic order of gender and kinship roles, the descriptive designations through which being is made in intellectual and conscious African captives, enslaved black people were violently rendered ungendered flesh, while representing temporal and conceptual entity in the body, not a biological occurrence, that its creation parts of calculated work of iron, wood, chains, knives, and the canine control of blood constitute black insensibility, ethno political eligibility with the dominant symbolic order continues to organize itself. The affirmative glorification of care work as anti-black and lies on the trope of the mammy in connection to black women's flash canon. 19. Echoing the author's plantation literature and adding another link to the chain of medic voice in the Southern Congress and seem compelled to present a public account of their childhood recollection of their mammies or mammies as history. The old South set the stage for describing mammies' laudable work, cycling the tropes of plantation literature, seven claims with the mutual devotion between mammy and the white children missionaries with tenderness and care of mammy proposal sinisterly trivialized and brutalized torture and the maim's black bodies unplayed. The entire affirmative is framed around the question of doing the plan for the right reasons to create new worlds beyond the anti-black and colonial violence through decolonial praxis. This ethics of care relies on hierarchy between those who extend care and those who receive it, and this distinction reproduces neoliberal anti-blackness. It gives parasitic upon separation of those who have capacity and those who do not easily. And Bashi 7. Care essays describe the ability to care as more attribute the hierarchical nature of mothering care and relationships goes under as asymmetrical relationships constructing those needing care and those delivering care. The distinction between the needy and those attending to their needs depends to ground a new ethical sociality care, focus on responsibility, responsiveness, compassion for the other, precisely replicates compassion, action of care, ethics, restraining focus on the fragility of the other, retaining asymmetry of the core of the relationship, potential connection between care and power, such an ethical starting point, reinstates hierarchy and undermines glass turning social relations or forms political agenda, reinstates asymmetry, power and well-being, and places in this active and independent self-citizen and neoliberal, distinguished from dependent, leaves yet the radical democratic potential of care thinking is further undermined by its particular limited conception of embodied sociality. This difficulty regarding hierarchies present all incantations of vocabulary stressing altruism. The impact of ongoing anti-blackness as gender violence against black women defense and social pathologies in Douglas 18. A black woman cardinal job of any claim to social instance or resistance transmission levels rendered void by her resisting a social and political concern waged against the liberal conduct of ordinance village asserts the countless discursive attempts that circumscribe black gender as a pinnacle of gender and sexual non-being are confounded to the meeting ground of indecence and privatization of the national treasury of rhetorical weight. The psychic value of black women dying on the bridge of gender provides a pivotal context village for that my country needs me, never my care would have to be invented. The ignorance of the fact of black gender was enacted through the use of gender violence, but to its unimaginable limits, such that the captive bore suffering beyond the scope of what was reason to animate the structure of gender difference. Its quotidian repetition places blackness in an intimate and open relationship with ungendering bonds and functions precisely on its constant misnaming, rights, recognition. The alternative is to reject affirmative for analysis and practice of the flesh. This needs to be our resistance from the starting point of the 0 point of slavery and the construction of blackness through violence. 18. Speaking flesh lies leading to our ungoodness and to break away from traditional epistemics that figure of blackness as need to be cured, corrected, or neatly packaged to disciplinary ethnography that's being cut of the flesh for the race subject to attach itself in the structures of linguistic alienate from ourselves. Black academics says speaking flesh produces knowledge and light forward of the brokenness of a black and intellectual culture worker. She speaks and writes this flesh that is crossed by the stigmata of enslavement, a psychic transmutation of the black body into flesh. Next up. The after-seller chauvinism, their calls for socialist coalition speak over indigenous comrades, was attacking genocide, vote neg for decolonization, entering 19 socialist party mentioned natives and determined direction of self-information means less than U.S. centers of colonial relations with the borders of the appeals that not U.S. Dutch allies with settler bloom definition as a territory where whites make up the majority of all the land which U.S. has stolen to the use worker states consider a return of stolen land null and void rights are given the worker taken all taken away due to lack of returned to be through a reservation system would take all the resources available to abolish capitalism, resource stolen from indigenous lands and sell state through destruction and sufficient delivery of the proletariat through the fact indigenous resource and indigenous people delivery by decolonization. Now, one here cannot be no link because cross-sex said that they create quote democratic coalition building through socialist logics. The link is 100. Harker, Reese Blue, Republican of the Socialist Workers Party, International Socialism, Socialist Ecology holds the key to a rewild and it will prove virtually impossible without humanity struggling in unity. A socialist ecology of open civilization that maintains its social reproduction through democratic oversight. Next up, racial capitalism recuperates this illiberal human subject when it sees presence of radical critique as ritualization of political struggle that sustains dispossession. Soulgate, turn on violent. The capture and diversion of black movements, languages, analysis, and the projects of dispossession, violent process that brings solidarity in order to enact stage. Neoliberal individuals harnessed into an epistemology of affirmation. Scholar states offer affirmation of fundamental esteem, more radical claims in about order to anti-colonial critique, continued structure bound to the endorsement of normative investments, racial gender election building, again, neoliberal internalized privatization response to most vulnerable populations were recruited to participate in devaluation came redirection of radical energies through the reparation by the states in universal reparative communities to resemble world driven by the U.S. empire offer nourishment comfort whether cultural politics like kinship bonds feminist movement side of privatization and selective incorporation reparation structured by colonial object wisdom part of the will human subject second parts of objects are mentioned worthy of repair solar states and feminist movements share the psychic untouched participating ongoing drawing lines around which objects are good and worthy of reparations offer the feeling of other actions just conduit shape racial capital forms desire debt and recognition take shape reject their investment in debate as a site for redemption which lies in addiction to pro-optimism if they are correct about psychoanalysis in C19 content informs beliefs of ideology of non-conditions desire of a game in a world we can't control percent of the world which we believe we can't fancy of a totally control sense of bonus and powerless to disguise that with a flexible subject to solve problems and the gamers are active in the fantasy world progress under attention they fetishize the real being certain social rights guided by illusion they know the gaming followed illusion but they still do it they know the grounds of massive aggression they touch their social symptom and intimate emotions transfer without fear the true bonds cartactically reveals themselves one of these spiritual approaches subjugated history of race is the medium through which the academy's unique set of counterinsurgent for edification Ferguson 12 movements around race are part of the same movement in which global competence sets on differences globalization producing accumulation landed on segmented markets lifestyle and in the U.S. and observed the academy documents struggles to achieve power to control the central documents and the student movements to observe the state needed the academy to revolve around member difference key to understand promote and regulate the permissive power reach out to new horizons to archive unarchivable components of interracism capitalizing and science cataloging the very institutions those movements were contesting the alternatives to dwell in the subline Ford and Lewis 18 communicated within the communicated without therefore reducing it to another signifier whereas communicated noxious calls for recognition to dialogue and to make the subline acts call for misrecognition for getting uncommunicated communism offering subline breach confident one privileges that a community the other privileges to opacity subline gap covers opaque cloak props and matching and enacting alternative social arrangements to mobilize capacity notice what should be a pedagogy as part of a communist project cast was not publicly articulated to enter the circuits of exchange of pack custom enemy demonstrances momentum we were constructing communist pedagogy the was not generated by collective reading but was generated by philosophy within the party form. That's fine.
Okay, string cross. Where did you stop right there? What card was that?
That was the last card under that critique, so Ford and Lewis.
Okay, cool. Nothing on case correct and did not read Franklin, right?
No.
Cool. Let's talk about the second off. The Kennan evidence. Explain the link.
The Kennan
And
evidence.
explain why care work is inherently anti-black.
Well, our argument is that the utility of care work in the context of the 1EC echoes a sort of symmetry between the relationship of the caring and the one receiving care. Our argument is that erases the racialized legacies of violence against black women.
Okay. I want to talk about does the critique make an ontological claim about the like?
Well,
the critique make an
we have done a
ontological
diagnosis through a study of history. We've diagnosed the causes of suffering for black women and how that relates to the affirmative.
Okay. The re-highlighting of the Juarez 18 evidence, explain how this mean frame subtraction competes.
Well, it proves that the 1AC is committed to psychoanalysis. And, I mean, CX also said that you were. So,
Okay.
this was like a cherry on top. But
Okay, cool. The Andrea evidence, I guess, explain the Andrea evidence.
So, the Andrea evidence describes the way that socialist movements interact with indigenous people. The first is that the PSL does not view colonial relationships of the U.S. as such, and therefore is engaged in a process of ignorance towards settler violence. The next argument is that the land on which the movement must occur has to be indigenous land, and that even though there are indigenous people involved in the movement, the worker state or the socialist democratic organizing that they describe them across, and that their evidence concludes that be created all is fundamentally still in control of the land, which furthers the dispossession of indigenous people.
Okay, I guess the Ferguson evidence, explain what the Ferguson evidence describes as the 1EC's curatorial approach.
So the 1EC has done a sort of presentation on how we should orient our politics, what specific movements we should take, how we should build those movements. Our argument is that you've curated basically a presentation for the academy to then take into a circuit of exchange and utilize in order to do analysis and training to beat that.
Okay, the academy co-opts the affirmative. How and who does it?
Well, our card cites plenty of examples, like readings of Deleuze and things by the FBI, but the absorptive capacities of the academy are hard to document, which is why they're so, potent.
Okay, the critique above, I guess explain what analysis and practice of the flesh looks like.
Sure. So the alternative does, we've explained the link and how it engages to the 1EC's approach. The alternative is a different approach to that mapping of suffering and the grammars of suffering that have occurred.
Room 4 or 5.
I think it was 4, but I'm not sure.
Sorry, Mark. $256.50. I'll send the cards. One second. It's like 1 or 2 cards that find it's just in the body of the email.
That's what I hear. I've not gotten it yet. Okay, now I have it.
Oh, sorry, order. Case, academy, on top. Care work, critique, psychoanalysis, frame subtraction, chauvinism, last. We're all good?
Mm-hmm.
The case was conceded and the interpretation requires extermination of black and native life, settler society, exports and produce violence to generate pleasure, state rewilding, appropriate state of knowledge essential is primitivism and land possession, vote after rewilds are aligned, which is an ethical character of black indigenous communities, which creates a decolonial practice and allows for decolonization, abolition of the USFG that rejects Eurocentric understanding of nature and breaks down imperial epistems, debating the app and the academy's good, which would be as a great decolonial advocacy, and shifts of disease, which will be later on the academy, which I'll go to. Now, first with permanent vote, seeding the terrain of the university, guarantees faster takeover, Kelly 25, Max Amigo for going robust community of organic intellectuals, a new fastest block representing billionaires and white supremacists with a goal of remaking the U.S. an image of whiteness, moving on the arbitraries, not me debating university, contested rank groups have managed to carve out species of resistance within the provided space for movements of lecture, the fight back to saying this work, we need to create a new university, will never change anything unless we are organized. Second, there's zero risk that the alternative can resolve any of the links. The reading of the procedural mean that the negative is just as invested in the game logic that they critique as we are, insofar as they ask for the out. This requires them to represent their arguments as commodities as well. Third, the Sulek evidence concedes objectivity chef and is linked to framework, not the app. It says land redistribution is good and then co-opting radical movements in the language of the state is bad. Newman already agrees state settlers states offer indigenous communities as affirmation of some demands while simultaneously signing more radical demands for land and redistribution. Now go to the our framework, our interpretation. It's just the way the benefits of the Afghans unique links to the one they see with a solvent alternative, not weighing it. It's paternalistic and racist to shut out taxes on by white settlers, which are racist. All of their racial and anti-blackness offense and justifies weighing the one they see against their critic. You should frame this debate through which strategies are best to challenge the material institutions and violence that underpin social relation. That's specified as buying taxes the best strategies. To tackle reward violence against otherwise debates are underprepared during a troubled era, which makes things like anti-blacks and everyone calls it burnouts to lock the status quo and turns any net benefits of voting negative. Now, permanent vote results the debate because that allows the liberation of black women. The two and explain how things like decolonization and abolition of the USDG specifically hurts black women, which we have said, which we have made claims about, are always parasitic on their livelihoods. Now, link turn job that means the USFG is parasitic towards black women, sees abolition of the USDG and creation of new war making and survival strategies outside the state are necessary and key. We have not explained the aftercare necessarily, but we've said explain how we create ethical rationalities. We don't allow for things like mutual aid to make survival strategies outside the state. Now, ontology is wrong and cannot give any examples and cause of why they're able to explain the violence. Now, go to psychoanalysis, frame subtraction, permutations as well as state, because we do not rely on psychoanalysis, but there's no alternative on frame subtraction because the job psychoanalysis is true in the concept of ontology. Means even if there's a risk, psychoanalysis is bad, you don't have any other way to understand liberal drives and settlers. Means even if it's bad, you still have to use it. Racial tropes is wrong. Evidence literally critiques the language of Indian savages and black states. Frame subtraction is a voting issue. It forces us to debate ourselves and kills our strategy. Forces us to debate Manuda, which kills our strategy. Not to debate our material solutions are key to solvency deficit because they absolutely do nothing. Which means even if you buy things like racial tropes, the psychoanalysis does things like racial tropes. They have no way to solve it or solve any of the links. Which the affirmative has at least a little some chance of doing because they really conceded the case and dropped ontology. Things like decolonization, land back are able to create material solutions for black and indigenous people. Now the chauvinism critique, the alternative is quite literally the affirmative. Things like socialism, conceded that things like socialism are able to create better material conditions for black and native people, which because the case was conceded. Now the survival, that was what I was saying above. That's things like being able to create survival strategies outside the state because dropped ontology. Now our evidence describes the app as decolonization as it's covered in abolition and land back, which means the alternative definitely does not compete with affirmative. It means you just vote affirmative if you buy any link if you buy the critique. Now I'm gonna go back up to the academy. They have not explained anywhere in the 1C or in Cossacks about who co-opts the affirmative, how the affirmative is actually co-opted, but we have specific warrants why debating the affirmative, which is debating the bro evidence in the academy, and the basis necessary to break down imperial epistems to drop the roll of the ballot is to vote for the debate who best provide strategies to deconstruct colonialism from the basis. It means that is your top priority. It means if they have not explained an alternative way to do that, then the reading of affirmative is key in the university.
Your interpretation was just to weigh the aft versus unique links.
It was benefits of the app and unique links to one issue to the one issue with the solvent alternative.
Okay. The internal link to burnout was not meeting your framework interval.
Said that's for tactics, just to find strategies to tackle real world violence, and with, absent that, it causes things like burnout because we're locked in the status quo and things like a Trump let out.
Okay, the order is the Black Feminism critique, the psychoanalysis pick, the capitalism critique, the academy critique, and then the case. Is everyone good?
You said it's Kaplan Academy?
Yeah.
Cool, yeah.
Sorry, good. Our theory of power is that the physical destruction of gendered black bodies through social violence is productive of social reference points for ethics, history, and metaphysics in an anti-black world. This is mental at the top of the one to see. Dropped. Our Douglas argument says that this not only produces a social psychic wage of anti-blackness, but also shows that the production of blackness as flesh occurs through the torture of black bodies, through the live streaming of racist violence in places like Buffalo and Jacksonville, the perception of the fungibility of slaves as what allows for the exploitation of black women in care politics, and gender violence like the killing of corn, which means that we have isolated a fundamental dynamic in the racialization of black populations that simultaneously produces a racial map of American society while being solely linked to black populations. Only an alternative of using flesh as a starting point for interpersonal understanding of black politics can form resistance that solves the impacts of the critique and the affirmative, which is also an impact turn to psychoanalysis. Now, lower your threshold for rejecting the 1AC. We should not have to win that the alternative is better than the status quo because they don't have an actual plan. We should just have to win that a link means the ass sacrifices native black women, which is sufficient to reject it. Because that, two, also, solvency will be sapped later on the case, which means the link is larger than the case. Now, the link to be proper. The non-consensual care work limit was dropped. The Kenan and Menzel cards are great, and they say that the AF's care work is a form of forced mummification that reifies systems of captivity and transform black women into flesh for the production of labor. The top-level framing is that they cannot explain during cross-examination as to who does care work, what that looks like, and all these things prove the erasure of the process of care work itself. The ONC replicates the logic of benevolence where the captivity of black women is defined not by productive labor, but through care work. And you should think about how enslaved black women were forced into the position of mammies to raise the children of slave holders, or how tropes of the welfare queen consolidated around the idea of black motherhood. This is proven by their statement that care work is for the people, and that the affirmative does not necessarily do care work, but rather politics of care. The idea that those things can be abstracted from each other is our link argument. The affirmative instrumentalizes gendered black bodies for the method without their consent or gain, which we've impact termed. There are two implications. First, that the AF retains the ability to decide what black people they want to be in their movement, while having no justification for why black people should consent to exist within the AF. Black identity is only structured and subjected for the purpose of improving the main, not black protagonist, leading to violent tokenization. This is supercharged by how they've cut around every women of black women in their ONC solvency article. The card says that their method of care work stems from a lineage of black feminist thought and cannot be disembarkated from it, which proves the link as black women's labor is extracted for the benefit of all, but black women are pathologized into tropes like the welfare queen, where they are depicted as being specifically needy. We'll set this after. Williams 23. The black love and care ethics comes from a lineage of black feminist thought, reflect on the ways that the ethics have been presented as a practice and gathering place for study with principles, guided inquiries, and developments, and other career application. That supercharges our misogyny or patriarchism offense because they galvanize black women to support their theory and advocacy, but burn them completely when it comes time to defend them in the debate. So there's no shot of a no-link argument. Williams 23. I call the grounded thoughts and grounded actions of Tubman, Nanny of the Maroons, Lord Hooks, and Garvey, who are all significant ancestors. Traditions of poetry, black feminism, womanism, black radicalism, and the Buddha Dharma are ever present. Now, the second link is a trade-off this which is a permutation. Framing black women's labor as being work for all or care work at large means that it saps the ability for black women to care for themselves in things like black women's health justice and grief work, which means that organizations like the Black Feminist Future, the School of Black Feminist Politics, and the Black Feminist Fund lose their organizational capacity. They'll say that their care work is not mandatory or necessary to the AF, but there's a pathologization DA, because the AF puts black women as an impossible choice of either coercively becoming part of the process of caring in a politics of caring that they have endorsed in the 1AC, or being pathologized as lazy for refusing to do the AF, which how the 1AC reproduces the tropes of the selfish black woman. Now, the rest of this debate is pretty easy. Framework, we meet it. The link is unique to the affirmative's politics, and the starting point of unique. Remember, it was not plan focused because the one does not have a plan. So we have impact turned a fundamental assumption of the affirmative, which is that care work and the politics of caring are valuable and can be dislocated from credit to black women. So we meet their framework intro, it means the next three arguments are irrelevant. The next argument was that it causes burnout, and there's no internal link because we meet your framework intro, but you're white, Dylan. Your intros are about violence against indigenous and African students, which means there's no impact to you specifically as a result of us not meeting your framework intro, which means that the risk of the link having a larger impact outweighs certainly outweighs the framework intro. Now, permutation was answered above by the trade-off this had, but it's also reactionary. Any risk of a link shows that the negative is right on the question of black feminist thought being a critical response to the affirmative, and this means that permutation is an attempt to negate disagreement through incorporation. But you did not do so in the 1AC. We have recut your solvency advocates, and you have specifically cut around the lines that attribute credit to the black women responsible for the movement that you've endorsed, which means that you cannot go for the permutation because the 1AC chose not to make the choice. Now, the link turn is wrong. There's no link turn because the alternative is solvent. It does movements. It just does so minus your endorsements of care work, which we've proven is intrinsic to the affirmative through the link debating above. Now, next argument was that the AF is not necessarily care work, but it's just a politics of caring and mutuality. But the idea that this can be disembarkated from care work derived from the labor of black women is the link that we have gone for, and is the thing we've impact turned for 6 minutes of this 2 hour. Now, the last argument is that ontology is wrong. We had no examples in CX. Dylan, you did not ask about ontology. We explained it as much as we could, and then the timer went off. If you wanted examples, you should have said the word, and I would have given them to you. In the 2 hour overview, you had plenty, so that should do this argument. Now, the psycho pick. No voting critique. The alternative. Our alternative is a rejection of the affirmative in favor of using flesh as the starting point for interpersonal understanding of black situation in politics. Transatlantic slavery made flesh as a shared identity for black folk, creating a history that can be used to form resistance movements. But our analysis has to come first because the AF starting point of Turtle Island in psychoanalysis is after the fact of slavery, which means that their conclusions do not work for people whose flesh means that they can be enslaved. Only the alternative can form resistance movements against anti-blackness from the starting point of 0 point of slavery and the construction of blackness through violence. If we've proven that our starting point of flesh is a better starting point than that turns the method, you should vote negative. Now, the psycho pick. No impact to frame subtraction. They said drop the debater, but did not explain why, or did not say the words deterrence or skew, which means you should not just drop the debater, but reject the argument. But also, they've explained why testing is the role of the negative. So, the impact, which was testing the AF, is an inevitable part of the negative's burden under their rule of debate. You should use reasonability. It's an arbitrary decision to come to that you should reject frame subtraction because it makes debate harder for the affirmative when they've already departed from a topical stasis. So, the negative has to go for any position. They have that link now. The cap K, no link turn offense, not going for it. It was dispositional. We will concede the permutation. The academy critique. I'm not going for it, but they have dropped psychoanalysis, which zeroes the case. Go there now. Debate is not neutral. It is the perfect ideological machine, and the form of debate gives the illusion of agency while scripting every choice, training debaters to flow with capital by fetishizing pseudo-productivity. Debate futures postmodern anxieties into a fantasy of mystery where losing is temporary and winning proves merit. The fantasy produces the subject capital demands, and interactivity is ideology. The impact is that debate absorbs emotions and labor so we can enjoy without consequence, which creates canned labor, and it turns the case because it produces an addiction to critique because you think that you're winning the game and making change when all you're committed to the game of debate and have done nothing for black women outside of debate, which is the Jasinski evidence which was dropped.
Took 2:35 before all took those now. I see the cards. Case kit. Everyone good? Conceded the role of ballot means to try to deconstruct colonialism within the debate, which I'll get to later, but frames out all the 2 in our offense. And the Academy is a good place to do that, which was dropped on the case, which we've made reasons in the pro-evidence wise, and key to deplatform anti-black and colonial methods of debate, which can only happen within inside the debate space. Otherwise, at least things like burnout and things like not being able to do anything. Now, conceded ontology implicates the rest of the debate. You should vote after abolish the USFT and rewild Turtle Island. Drop that looks like things like land back and abolish the USFT was nowhere in the 2 hour, which should implicate how you view the link debate because there's absolutely zero specificity. Ontology implicates the rest of it. These drop the native life facing gratuitous violence, which looks like native life being shot over 30 times and one shot will do the trick. And later, settlers have a little bit of jobs to exterminate native life, and then extermination generates pleasure. Settler society requires that in order to make itself coherent, which implicates how you view the critique. Because I'm going to go, the critique said our interpretation is to weigh the benefits of the Afghans' unique leaks with the 1AC with a solvent alternative, which would implicate the wording of that is very important because they do not have a solvent alternative, and drop the not weighing is paternalistic and racist. The shit out taxes done by white settlers returns all the erasure into black stuff. Now you say I'm white, but that doesn't matter because it's a question of models. Models in the debate space. It's not neither about this round specifically, but the question of models because you drop the role of that our model is specifically key to resist colonialism in the debate space, which means even if I'm white, it's not a question of me and this debate space, but how our interpretation is able to deconstruct racism within the debate space. Now they say they concede our interpretation and said that they still win on our interpretation, but that's wrong because the alternative is definitely not solving the quote to an say quote the alternative does movements. What the fuck does that mean? Because it definitely does not do anything. They have absolutely zero specificity. When we have told you that things ours looks like land back and mutual aid, which they have not tested at all. Now the permutation should definitely resolve this because the one AC has never said that we force people into movements, but allow them for them to create survival strategies outside let's say, which is the costliest explanation. Allow for us to create new directionalities between the human nature divide, which means the permutation resolve that because the act allows for the liberation of black women. The 2NR has not explained how things like decolonization actually make conditions worse for black people. We have made specific ontological claims about how the UFG is always parasitic on black and native life, which was dropped by the 2NR. Drop ontology in the 2R means it should be try or die. And even if you think we dropped ontology in the 1R, the tiebreaker should definitely be the drop the roll of ballot, which means to resist colonial debate. They have not explained how any of their offense functions under the roll of ballot, or why any of their offense matters. But we have told you that debate is a site of black and native fungibility, which means it is try or die for new forms of world making. Consider the roll of ballot was dropped. You should be very skeptical of the 2R leak articulation because none of it was about actually decolonization, and us fiating away the USFG, which means it's try or die for new forms of world making. Considering the USFG is always parasitic on their living. We have not explained the act at any point as terror, but rather we have allowed it for them we have explained it as abolishing the USG and allowing for new survival strategies. That we have not said we have to force anyone to our movements, but rather we allow them to have the attempt to even do so in the first place.